He grinned like the rules were a joke, like the room and its silence belonged to his bloodline. But when I slid the folder across the glass table, the air changed. Even gravity seemed to hesitate. The walls of the 38th floor conference room shimmered under the late afternoon sun, casting streaks of orange and bronze across the polished stone. The air conditioning hummed faintly, but it couldn't compete with the heat crawling under my skin. Across from me, lounging like he owned the damn skyline, sat Jordan Langley, the VP's son. Unbuttoned collar. Rolex flashed like punctuation on every dismissive gesture. He hadn't even brought notes. He leaned back in the leather chair, ankle resting on his knee, and flashed that familiar, inherited smirk. "We don't have time for bylaws," he said, the words dripping with patronizing ease. "The client already loves the concept. We just need your team to rubber stamp it." A flicker of laughter from his side of the table. Two junior associates, one checking their phone under the table, the other nervously sipping LaCroix. And to Jordan's left, Marianne from compliance, lips pursed so tightly they nearly disappeared. I wasn't sure if she was holding back rage or panic. Possibly both. I looked down at the clean document folder in front of me. It was pristine, prepared, highlighted, and edged in enough legal precedent to flatten a skyscraper if dropped from the right height. The words, Section 7.4, binding internal compliance, stared back at me like a loaded gun. 2 days ago, I would have hesitated. 2 weeks ago, I would have looked to my manager for backup. But today that wasn't going to happen. "Jordan," I said quietly, "would you like to see what the client already signed?" He blinked, caught off guard for the first time. The smirk didn't vanish, but it stalled. The first sign of wear in his polished persona. He nodded once. I slid the document across the table. The client's signature glared in blue ink beside Section 7.4. The clause that very clearly bound all operations to the agreed internal bylaws, and stripped any executive override unless approved by the compliance committee. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "From the client," I replied, "during last Thursday's Zoom. You remember? The one you skipped?" The room dipped into silence. Even the LaCroix drinker paused mid-sip. 2 seconds passed. 3. Then the client's name, scrawled in unmistakable pen, finally registered with him. He leaned forward, a touch too fast, trying to reclaim control. "Okay, so they signed this. Fine. But we can still realign strategy if—" "No, Jordan," I tapped the clause with my pen. "Section 7.4 isn't flexible, it's not a guideline, it's protocol, and as of this moment, it's binding." His mouth opened, closed, then tilted into a tighter smile, now slightly fraying at the edges. "We'll see what legal says." "Legal drafted it." Another beat of silence. I didn't need to look to see Marianne's shoulders loosen. Across the table, one of the juniors finally put down their phone. I could feel the power shifting, and it wasn't loud. It was quiet, razor sharp, and deeply satisfying. But Jordan wasn't done yet. His name bought him favors, and he was used to pushing through locked doors with inherited keys. He reached for his phone. "Let's loop in the client now, shall we?" "Already did," I said. "This morning, they confirmed their position. We're to proceed exactly as outlined under Section 7.4. Now, the silence had weight. He didn't look smug anymore, and that's when the smallest smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Follow this, or fold? What happens when the VP himself walks in and takes his son's side? The VP didn't knock. He swept into the room like a tide, bringing with him the scent of woodsy cologne and the chill of corner office authority. Laughter echoed from a phone call he'd just ended, and he barely glanced at the tension before him. Jordan straightened like a soldier called to attention, but the flicker of desperation in his eyes didn't go unnoticed. "Everything under control?" the VP asked, eyes sliding from his son to the rest of us, then landing squarely on me. "Yes," Jordan jumped in. "Small misunderstanding with compliance. Nothing that can't be." "Resolved," I interjected, calm as ever. "It already has been." The VP's eyes narrowed. "I assume you're referring to Section 7.4? I nodded once, my fingers resting casually on the open document. The VP's gaze dropped to the contract on the table. He recognized the signature. He'd personally wooed the client over rounds of golf and decades of boardroom favors. "This clause wasn't supposed to be final," he said slowly. "The client disagrees," I replied. "They requested its inclusion during our Zoom call last Thursday. It was recorded." There was a shift behind me, the kind that happens when unspoken alliances start to crumble. Marianne from compliance cleared her throat, for the first time speaking up. "We've verified the timestamp, sir. The recording and the client's direct confirmation align. Our hands are tied." The VP inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring slightly. He looked at his son, then back at me, and something in his expression changed. Gone was the smooth, dismissive confidence. In its place, calculation. "Let me ask you something," he said. "Why push so hard for this clause? You've been here, 3 years?" 4, I corrected. "And in that time, you've learned that we move fast. We trust each other to make bold decisions. Section 7.4 slows things down. It creates bottlenecks." "It prevents disasters," I said evenly. "It ensures accountability." There it was, the word that made executives twitch. The VP circled the table slowly. His steps were unhurried, thoughtful, like a shark deciding whether the water still tasted like blood. "You think this is how careers are made?" he asked. "By standing on technicalities?" "No," I replied. "But they end on them." His lips pressed into a thin line. He glanced at Marianne, who gave a barely perceptible nod. The junior associates didn't move, barely breathed. Then, in a move so smooth it could have been rehearsed, he reached out and closed the folder. "Very well, Section 7.4 stands." Jordan blinked in disbelief. "Dad!" The VP raised a single finger, not to silence, but to warn. Jordan swallowed whatever protest he was building. "You'll proceed under the client's terms," the VP said, "exactly as documented." He turned toward me, and his voice dropped half an octave, quieter but sharp enough to leave a mark. "You're either going to go very far here, or you're going to make some powerful enemies." I met his gaze without flinching. "With all due respect, sir, I'm not here to make friends." He gave the ghost of a smile, then left. No phone call, no handshake, just absence, as sudden as his arrival. Jordan looked as if someone had pulled the floor out from under him. He stayed seated, staring at the closed folder like it had betrayed him personally. I gathered my papers, not rushing. Behind me, compliance finally exhaled, and as I stepped into the hallway, heart still steady, I realized something. That was the easy part. What if compliance wasn't the only department watching, and someone upstairs just took notice? Ever witnessed a quiet power move like this in your office? Drop a comment, we're collecting legends. My cursor hovered over it longer than I'd admit. The sender wasn't anyone from our usual chain, not even legal or compliance. It was someone far quieter. Elena Morel, Director of Risk Oversight. A name rarely heard, never seen. The kind of presence that suggested she operated 3 floors above the drama and 5 moves ahead of it. I clicked. "Your handling of Section 7.4 was noted. Please come to 41C at 10 a.m. Bring no one. This conversation does not exist. No emojis, no context, just precision, pressure, and potential. The hallway to 41C was unnervingly quiet, lined with high-security doors and frosted glass that swallowed sound. No chatter, no Zoom call echoes, just the padded hum of carpet under my heels. I scanned my badge. The lock blinked green, and when I stepped inside, it felt less like entering a meeting, more like crossing into a chess match. Elena sat alone at a round table with a laptop, a closed file, and a cup of tea. Not coffee, tea. "Sit," she said, not unkindly, but with an authority that left no space for negotiation. I did. She didn't offer pleasantries, didn't ask how I was. Instead, she opened the file, and inside, there it was. The entire section 7.4 compliance thread. Client confirmation, timeline of escalation. Even a snapshot of Jordan's posture frozen mid-defiance. "You know who signed this clause into our operating framework 5 years ago?" she asked. I shook my head. I did. Her gaze didn't waver. "And for 5 years, people have been trying to pretend it doesn't exist, including Jordan, including his father. You're the first to enforce it without flinching." I said nothing. I wasn't sure if it was praise or the start of something else. Elena closed the folder. "Project Athena is real," she said. "Codename for our internal audit initiative, designed to test the integrity of leadership under pressure. We've been watching how departments bend, twist, and sometimes break when legacy power pushes back." I blinked. "You mean this was—" She shook her head. "Not a test, but your response revealed more than any audit ever could." A silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken consequences. "You're being moved," she said finally. "Effective immediately. Your access levels will increase. Your calendar, don't worry, it'll be updated for you. You report directly to me now." This time I spoke. "And Jordan?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Jordan will remain exactly where he is." I exhaled. "This won't go unnoticed." "Oh, it's not supposed to." She stood, and I followed instinctively. "But you'll need to walk carefully now. Visibility is power, but it's also exposure." As I stepped out of 41C, the carpet beneath me felt the same, but something fundamental had shifted. My badge worked in new elevators. My inbox pinged with encrypted threads. My name appeared on meetings I hadn't scheduled. But more than that, eyes were starting to follow me in the hallway. Not all hostile, not all friendly, just aware. Game on. The first calendar invite came 5 minutes before the meeting. Subject: informal sync, departmental strategy alignment. Time: 11 a.m. Location: East Glass, room 12. Be attendees: you, Jordan Langley, Marianne R. I stared at the screen. This was no strategy meeting. This was payback. By the time I reached 12B, the windows were fogged from the morning's humidity, diffusing sunlight into a soft glare. The room was glass-walled, visible from every angle of the floor. That was intentional, a stage disguised as a workspace. Jordan was already there, standing by the window like he'd just landed from some better, more cinematic life. He turned when I entered, and the performance began. "Thanks for making time," he said, voice laced with artificial warmth. "This won't take long." I sat, posture neutral. Marianne entered right behind me, clipboard in hand, no expression on her face. But her eyes flicked once toward me, as if to say, "Brace yourself." Jordan clicked a remote. A slide appeared on the wall monitor behind him. Not a strategy, not an alignment, a screenshot of me clipped from our internal Slack. It was a thread from 2 months ago, harmless at the time, a compliance joke, a meme even, something like, Section 7.4. The company's least loved child. A reaction GIF had followed. I remembered it. So did legal. We all laughed, but taken out of context, on a screen, in a glass room, with an audience just beyond the walls, it looked different. Calculated, critical, dangerous. Jordan turned slowly. I just want to make sure we're aligned, he said, tone syrupy. You're now representing us at a higher level. Messaging matters. Behind the veneer of diplomacy, he was holding a loaded gun, the kind that fires through HR, not glass. I didn't flinch. Interesting that you kept that, I said. Remind me again, is Slack archiving part of your role? His jaw tightened. It's not about the tool. It's about tone. I looked at Marianne, whose fingers tapped slowly on her pen. I could see the conflict rising in her, the pressure to stay neutral, the instinct to stay clean. Let's be clear, I said, turning back to Jordan. This isn't a performance review. It's a performance. He blinked. Let's also be clear, I continued. The Slack message was posted on the internal Humor and Hazards channel, labeled non-binding, approved by Compliance for Morale. I paused. You remember morale, right? A few people outside the glass paused to glance in. The word had landed. Jordan tried to pivot. Still, I cut in. If you're concerned about image, perhaps we should review your Slack threads from the last quarter. I believe there was a meme about risk oversight and tinfoil hats. Marianne choked back an awkward cough, part laugh, part horror. Jordan's ears went pink. Checkmate. He reached for the remote, turned off the screen. Well, he said, this was productive. I stood. I agree. Next time you want to talk tone, try using your own voice instead of other people's screenshots. The door clicked closed behind me before he could respond. Back at my desk, an encrypted email awaited. Subject, Athena, confirmed observation logged. Note, public pushback, controlled narrative, status, escalation detected/handled. This wasn't just about Section 7.4 anymore. This was survival in a company where silence was currency. And I just raised my voice. By Thursday, the office had turned into a whisper factory. People didn't speak openly. They tilted heads, dropped tones, shared glances that buzzed louder than words. And my name? It rode the current, not loud, not sharp, but persistent, like a signature in invisible ink revealed only under tension. The elevator to floor 44, a level most forgot even existed, now opened for my badge. It led to the internal governance suite, walls lined with brushed steel, air too still, chairs too clean. It was the kind of place where decisions happened without fingerprints. Elena was waiting, arms crossed, beside a massive touchscreen lit up with nodes, links, names, like a neural map of the company's nervous system. Something's about to move, she said. What kind of something? She tapped the screen. A name expanded. A. Reyes, Director of Client Relations. Reyes flagged your Slack showdown, not to defend you, to see if you're a threat to his influence over client accounts. You disrupted a chain he's part of. I frowned. He's aligned with the VP? Loosely, opportunistically, more concerned with perception than policy. Another tap, a new name lit up. D. Clark, Internal Strategy. Clark's watching, too, not your enemy, not your friend, just someone who tracks patterns. And you, my dear, have just become a pattern. She turned toward me, folding her arms. You've made the mistake, or the choice, of becoming visible. Now every move you make will mean more than you intended. I tried to keep my face still, but something in my chest coiled tight. Let's say I back down, I said. mute myself, work quietly. What happens? You disappear, and they win, quietly, permanently. A silence wrapped the room. It wasn't fear, not yet, but it had teeth. I looked at the map again, names, threads, power lines disguised as dotted arrows. And if I lean in, I asked, a small smile. Then we tighten your circle, quiet support, strategic visibility. You'll never see applause, but you'll stop being outnumbered. A folder slid across the table toward me. No label, just weight. What is it? Section 7.4 wasn't the first clause that made someone uncomfortable, and it won't be the last. I opened it. Inside were 6 pages. Each one was a snapshot of buried compliance violations, swept under legacy names, blink and you miss it policies, and one especially interesting entry. Executive Approval Override, Client X, 2021, signed by A. Reyes. The room tilted slightly. Or maybe it was just the weight of knowing. I closed the folder. This was buried until you showed us the shovel. As I left the suite, the hum of the office sounded different, not louder, sharper, tuned to a new frequency. And somewhere between the HR portal, the coffee machine, and the laminated values poster, I realized something chillingly clear. I was now part of a game I hadn't signed up to play. But I wasn't leaving the table, not yet. The air in the 38th floor kitchenette smelled like overworked espresso and burnt toast, the scent of employees clinging to caffeine and routine as if both could protect them from office politics. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the foam swirl like a storm. Around me, small talk fluttered, a pitch delayed, someone's toddler learning to say quarterly, the intern who mispronounced compliance in front of the COO. Noise, pleasant, oblivious noise. Until Marianne stepped in, eyes sharp behind her wire frames. She didn't say hello. "We need to talk," she whispered. I followed her into an unused huddle room. The frosted walls offered only a thin veil of privacy. She shut the door and slid her tablet across the table. "I wasn't supposed to show you this," she began, "but I'm done pretending silence is neutral." On screen was a message thread, internal, encrypted, between Reyes and Jordan. Reyes, "We hold until week's end. Let her show her cards." Jordan, "She's arrogant. Elena will tire of her eventually." Reyes, "Maybe. But not before we shift the narrative. I've got ops lining up a deviation case." I leaned back, bile rising in my throat. "They're setting me up." Marianne nodded. "They're tracking your Athena privileges, watching for any mistake they can frame as overreach." My heart pounded. "Have I?" "No. But they don't need facts. They need a story that feels real to the board." I stood up, pacing the small space. "They're going to manufacture a compliance breach?" "Yes, something tied to external communication. Your Slack, your access logs, your call records." My mouth went dry. "They're weaponizing protocol." Marianne looked at me, jaw tight. "Welcome to the part where rules don't protect you. They become the noose." I pressed my palms on the table. "They want me afraid, mute, defensive." "Exactly," she said. "Because when you're on your heels, you stop being dangerous." I turned toward the wall, thoughts racing. Elena had warned me visibility was exposure, but I hadn't expected the attack to come dressed in policy, cloaked in process. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Just me? And one other person you've never met." She paused. "You need to move carefully, today, before they finalize whatever they're stitching together." "How?" She reached into her bag and handed me a keycard. "What's this?" "Restricted floor, data governance. No one uses it anymore except the auditors, and policy archival." My mind clicked into motion. You want me to pull the logs before they scrub them? She didn't confirm, didn't need to. I exhaled. If I do this, I burn my safety net. No, she said, eyes meeting mine. You weave a new one, out of fire. Back at my desk, I stared at the keycard. It felt heavier than plastic should, like it carried risk, truth, and the weight of every whispered threat I'd ignored too long. They wanted me quiet. They should have known better. The door to the data governance floor opened with a mechanical sigh. Slow, reluctant, like the building itself wasn't sure anyone should be here. Fluorescent lights flickered awake overhead, casting everything in a sickly, bureaucratic glow. Rows of dormant terminals sat along steel tables, blinking occasionally like they were dreaming in code. The hum of the servers was constant, a quiet, synthetic heartbeat. Not a soul in sight. I slid the keycard into the wall terminal marked Archive Access, internal only. Access granted. A stream of file indexes began to unfold, compliance logs, audit trails, Slack exports, redacted meeting transcriptions, the bones of the company laid bare in kilobytes. I searched the folder Marianne hinted at, internal Slack data tied to Athena privileges. Then another query, outgoing communications, section 7.4 enforcement. They had already started. 3 logs had been flagged, not for violation, but for tone assessment. That was their play. They couldn't challenge facts, so they were going after tone. Subjectivity disguised as policy. And they'd done it before. I found evidence from 2021. A pattern of muted removals, all categorized under perceived non-alignment. That's what they were building for me. A trap made of fog. I downloaded the logs. Then something else caught my eye. A folder labeled Executive Compliance Overrides/Archived Reyes. I hesitated. One more step in meant no turning back. But silence was no longer an option. The folder opened, dozens of override entries, sign-offs on client deviations, approvals executed after the fact. And, most damning, a document time-stamped 5 hours after a failed compliance review that still greenlit a client deal. It was signed, approved, and buried by Reyes. I didn't copy it. I didn't need to. I photographed it on the locked terminal's read-only screen, with metadata, timestamps, server source tags. A single shot that, in the right hands, would ripple like a detonated secret. As I stood, the terminal dimmed again, returning to standby. And then, behind me, a sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I slipped the keycard into my pocket and turned. Elena. She didn't look surprised or angry, just watchful. I wondered if you'd make it here, she said. You knew? I planted the logs there yesterday. I blinked. I needed to see, she continued, stepping closer, whether you'd run from the fire or walk straight into it. My throat tightened. You set the trap? No, they did. She glanced at the rows of silent machines. I just ensured it wasn't invisible. Why? Because war in this company isn't fought in boardrooms, it's fought in metadata. A silence fell between us, heavy, real. Finally, she said, now you have proof. But that's not enough. What else is there? Her eyes locked on mine. Strategy. I followed her out of the room. The door clicked shut behind us like a seal closing over classified truth. They wanted me quiet. Now they were about to hear me. Loud, calculated, and unignorable. The strategy room was nothing like the others. No screens, no glass walls, no agenda on a whiteboard with bullets like synergy or quarterly integration. Just a round mahogany table, a pitcher of water, and the kind of silence that invites only those who know how to weaponize it. Elena gestured for me to sit. A moment later, 2 others entered. One I recognized from corporate town halls. D. Clark, internal strategy. Quiet, precise, always watching. The other was new to me. Lana Pires, lead counsel for enterprise risk. Sharp suit, eyes like polished glass. Elena nodded at them both. She's in. Clark leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. We've reviewed your findings, Reyes's override logs, Slack manipulation, the attempted tone-based escalation. All of it paints a pattern, but patterns don't win battles. Narratives do. Lana picked up where he left off. We have two choices. Option A, submit a full internal escalation. Board review, risk audit, standard protocol, that buys us time, not results. And option B? I asked. She smiled faintly. Control the story before it escalates. Selective exposure, leaks to departments Reyes depends on. Let his own alliances panic and dismantle themselves. Elena added, the goal isn't revenge, it's correction, quiet, legal, irreversible. My pulse quickened. But this exposes me. They'll know where it came from. Only if you lead the story, Clark replied. But what if someone else starts asking questions? Loudly, publicly? I raised an eyebrow. Who? Elena slid a folder across the table. Inside, a client email chain. They'd noticed a pricing inconsistency. A small one, a decimal shift in a line item, but enough to raise suspicion. And the kicker? The override had Reyes's name on it, again. They're poking around, Lana said. If they go public, even internally, Reyes becomes radioactive. And you become the one who stayed inside the lines. So we just wait? I asked. Clark shook his head. We nudge. Anonymous tip to client relations. Attach the inconsistency. Let their team run it up the chain. When they ask for documents, we let them discover what they were never supposed to see. It was ruthless, elegant, legal, and I was part of it. What happens to Jordan? I asked finally. Elena met my gaze. He'll survive. Nepotism always floats, but he'll have less air, fewer rooms, smaller keys. I sat back, absorbing the weight of it. They weren't just protecting me. They were pulling a thread, one that, if yanked just right, could unravel years of backdoor deals and legacy arrogance. Are you sure this is the cleanest path? I asked. No such thing, Lana said, only the quietest one. I stood slowly. My voice was steady. Then let's move. As I left the room, I passed two executives whispering in the hallway. One glanced at me, paused, looked away. They'd felt the shift. And whether they knew it yet or not, the story was no longer theirs to write. The leak dropped at 8:47 a.m., not to the press, not even to the board. Just one carefully crafted message routed through an anonymous compliance alias addressed to client relations. Red team. Subject: pricing discrepancy, account number A, X412/Reyes override body. Flagged line item deviation observed. Records indicate executive override applied post-signature. Consistency with previous irregularities. Suggest internal audit before client escalation. Internal oversight watch. It was a whisper dressed like a red flag. By 10 a.m., the whispers were everywhere. The kitchen was quiet. The elevators were full but silent. In the Slack channels where emojis usually bounced like confetti, all you could hear was digital breathing. People weren't talking. They were reading. At 10:16, a junior associate posted a link to the company's ethics portal in a general chat. At 10:28, the legal team sent out a mass reminder on best practices for client approvals. And at 10:31, Reyes canceled a call, then another, then went offline entirely. I sat at my desk, untouched coffee going cold beside me, watching the story unfold, not in headlines, but in hallway glances, urgent huddles, and calendar blocks vanishing into quiet little vacuums. Jordan hadn't shown up to the office, no surprise. He'd spent the week trying to rally his father's allies behind closed doors. But now the wind had changed. Compliance wasn't afraid anymore. Legal had gone neutral. Even HR had started checking old logs. The tone was shifting. By noon, Elena messaged me. "Stage 1 complete. He's cornered," I responded. "What now?" Her reply was instant. "Let him try to claw back. He'll go loud, and that's where he'll lose." She was right. At 2:03 p.m., Reyes sent a company-wide memo. Formal tone. Vague reassurances. A reference to discrepancies under review and trust in leadership. It was so transparently hollow, it only made things worse. The reply threads were locked within minutes, but the damage was done. By 3:15, an emergency executive committee meeting was scheduled. Reyes wasn't invited. By 4 p.m., Jordan's calendar had a new meeting on it. Discussion, role redefinition, forward strategy. I didn't smile. Not really. Just breathed. And maybe, for the first time in months, it didn't feel like exhaling a secret. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because when legacy cracks, it doesn't collapse. It splinters, and sharp pieces fly everywhere. The executive suite on the 45th floor had gone quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The kind of quiet that comes after a blast. Glass doors shut, assistants walking faster, eyes darting to phones, then quickly away. Silence that wasn't absence of noise, but the concentration of it in places no one could see. I was summoned at 5:32 p.m., not by Elena, not by compliance, by the CEO's office. The calendar event was titled simply, Review. No agenda, no attachments, just my name and his. The elevator took longer than usual, or maybe time had changed around me. I could hear my own breath echoing in my chest as I stepped out into the marble hallway. The door to the corner office stood open, golden light spilling onto the floor like an invitation or a trap. He looked up from behind his desk as I entered, calm, buttoned, watching. "Sit." I did. He folded his hands and leaned forward. "I'm not here to ask what you did," he said. "I already know. No theatrics, no preamble. But I am here to ask why." I met his eyes. "Because I wasn't hired to pretend silence is compliance." A pause, then a slow nod. "Good answer." He stood, walked to the window. The skyline burned gold and gray outside, a city unaware that inside this office, power was shifting tectonically. "We built this place on agility," he said. "Speed, gut." But somewhere along the way, gut became gamble, and gamble became recklessness. He turned back to me. "You weren't supposed to be the one to clean this up." "I know, but you did." He returned to his desk and opened a folder. Not digital, not encrypted, just paper, old school, intimate. Inside was a memo. Subject, Leadership Transition Planning. Q4. My throat tightened. "You're being promoted," he said. "Not because of what you uncovered, but because of how you handled the fallout. You didn't shout. You didn't burn. You contained." "And Reyes?" I asked, stepping down, quietly. "Health reasons?" He smiled without warmth. "You understand?" "And Jordan? We'll get to keep his parking spot." The CEO's tone sharpened. "But his influence? That's over." He pushed the memo toward me. "Sign it or don't. But if you do, understand this. You're not just playing the game now. You are the game." I picked up the pen. The weight of every clause, every look, every silent war over Slack compressed into the ink. I signed, not for revenge, not for validation, but because power in this place had always been hidden, wrapped in paper, clauses, and silence. And now it had a new shape, mine. The office looked the same, Same flickering elevator lights, same too cold conference rooms, same lukewarm coffee in branded mugs that no one actually liked. But everything had changed. People didn't look through me anymore, they looked to me. My name was in CC lines I used to be left off of. Decisions I once waited for now waited for me. And the strangest part? I didn't feel bigger. The room just felt quieter, sharper. The hallway outside my new office had floor-to-ceiling glass. I could see them, Reyes's old allies, orbiting new centers of gravity. Some drifted, some pivoted, some vanished. Jordan had returned eventually, suit a little more fitted, smile a little more cautious. He kept his head down in meetings now, his commentary offered only when requested, and never without a glance toward me. We hadn't spoken since the transition. We didn't need to. One afternoon, Marianne stopped by. She didn't say much, just dropped a small white envelope on my desk. Inside, a printed copy of Section 7.4, now featured in the new Client Governance Handbook. Highlighted, bolded, non-optional. "It's policy now," she said. "Officially?" "Board ratified this morning." Elena made sure of it. I held the page between my fingers like something sacred, not for what it was, a clause, a paragraph, a rule, but for what it became. Proof that quiet power can be louder than ego. That rules, when wielded right, don't restrain. They protect. That silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. The sunset hit my glass wall just then, and I remembered that moment in the conference room all those weeks ago when Jordan had laughed and said, "No time for bylaws," and I had simply placed Section 7.4 on the table. Back then, it was a whisper. Now, it was law. And I wasn't just part of the meeting anymore. I was the one who set the table.